All right, welcome into episode 46 of the Two Pad Stack podcast. Glad to have you all back here again. It's been a little while. Last time I chatted with you, it was development camp, so had some time off here, but we're back in the saddle, and we're super excited to welcome one of our newest guests here that's going to be joining the show, Evan Marinofsky. How's it going, Evan?
I am good, Ace. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be on the David Krejci episode. It's middle of summer, but obviously want to talk Bruins. So
Love it,
I'm
love it.
excited to be here. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, as Sean Thornton would call David Krejci, French fries. So because he can't say franchise for some reason. Anyways, really excited to chat with you here today. There's been not a whole lot going on, but that's kind of to be expected for August in the calendar year for the Boston Bruins and the NHL itself. So, but the question that's got to be on everybody's mind first and foremost is, why haven't we heard anything on the Jeremy Swayman front? And where will that end up falling with the Bruins cap situation as it is? That's kind of what a lot of people are thinking about. I'm thinking.
Yeah, they are thinking about that, and it's really the only kind of thing left to tie up for the
Mhm,
Bruins this offseason. Everything's kind of been done. I talked about it with Hags on Pucks
mhm.
with Hags like last week, and it was kind of like, oh, maybe they signed like a veteran winger. I know we might get into that.
Yeah,
But the Swayman thing is the big thing. When
yeah,
does this happen? And I'm not worried about it.
right.
I think the fact they traded Linus Olmark, I think the fact that Jeremy Swayman was in the schedule release video, like he is going to be here.
Mhm.
Um, they avoided arbitration, thankfully. The question is, when does it happen? I think it happens right before camp. I know sometimes they do August signings, mid-August, things like that, and maybe they do that in this case. But I see this more kind of hitting right before camp when everybody kind of comes back. Um, it doesn't seem like they're in a super rush. Another thing, you're not hearing a lot about this from the NHL insiders either. It's not like this is contentious. It's not like you're
Right,
getting a tweet from Darren Drager or Elliot Friedman every day being like, hey, the Bruins are still, 2.5 million apart from Jeremy
right.
Swayman. There's just been nothing. And so my guess is, and this is not informed, my guess is they're just, kind of on vacation, doing the summer stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and, in terms of, I'm curious, like, what is the holdup?
Mm.
Numbers wise, is it years? Would the Bruin, or would Jeremy Swayman rather have sort of like an Austin Matthews like deal where
Yeah,
it's, hey, I'm going to make a lot of money for 3 or 4 years. Then I'm going to make a lot of money again when the cap goes up, and it's going to be relative to that, which is risky for him. Um, because again, like, you don't know how the next couple of years are going to pan out. My guess is he'll be fine, but you never know.
yeah.
And then the other option is you just go long term. Like I keep saying 8x8. I think that's what it should be.
Why not?
I think that's the move. I think that makes sense. And I know that Jeremy Swayman has yet to have a season where he is the surefire number one guy. But all signs point to him being that guy, not
Right.
just the postseason, but I think the way he's played, I think personality matters a lot with goalies. And your ability to be cool, your ability to handle the moment matters, and you can pick that up in certain situations, whether it be a really big game in the playoffs, whether it be a really big game in the regular season, whether it be a couple of games in a row that you're kind of forced to play in. And I think he checks those boxes. So I think that's an okay bet. 8x8 is what I like.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I've seen other people say that too. So for me, to answer your question, Swayman, beginning of right before camp, and then 8x8, I think would be my hope, and I think what he should get.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and I think you also kind of hit the nail on the head. It doesn't seem like there's any level of contention out there. I mean, you heard him publicly after last offseason and after the arbitration process. He said, I don't want to go through that again. And the easy route to get a contract to paper with Jeremy Swayman would be to go through arbitration because he has to follow suit and abide by the arbitrator's ruling, and that would be a guaranteed contract. That is the path of least resistance for the front office to get Jeremy Swayman under contract. However, they backed up their words when they said that they want Jeremy Swayman to be the guy after they traded away Linus Hallmark by not opting for arbitration, because the team did have the opportunity when Swayman did not elect for it to elect for it themselves, and they did not do that. So obviously everybody's doing the right thing. They're saying the right things. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it is definitely probably just a, let's just disassociate for a little bit. Let's go hang out at Pasta's wedding over in Croatia and have some fun and hang out with David Krejci being David Krejci again and all those good guys. So I think that's good. I honestly would be okay with even going, upward of 9.5 with Swayman if that's really what the differentiator is, because the cap's only going to continue to go up now that escrow's been paid off. So I'd be okay with that if Swayman would go to that longer term contract. I wouldn't do that for like a 3 or 4 year deal because he straight up hasn't proven to me yet that he can be an Igor Shesterkin or those other big names out there. But but if he's willing to go the term, like lock that up because it's going to look like a great contract in 4 seasons.
It's funny because, like, it, you know, with the way that it's gone with him, and I just 9.5 is a lot, but I'm not far off with that. The other thing is, like, I think Swayman has leverage here, where it's like, so you're not going to sign me. You're going to have me hold out, and you're going to roll with
Yeah.
Bussy and Korpisalo to start the year. Like, that's very unproven. Right. So maybe he does get that 9.5. Like, to me, nothing's off the table at this point. I think it's not urgent right now. I don't think they have a ton of urgency, but once training camp starts to get closer and once training camp begins, that's when that urgency sort of starts. And I think that's also why, like, as the dust has settled on that Ullmark trade, I think that's kind of why they went after a guy like Korpisalo, not to start, but I don't mean like to start in place of Swayman.
Sure.
But I think to have as like as a veteran-ish backup behind Swayman.
Yeah.
To kind of have him there, a guy that you can plug in for 30, 32 games reliably. And I think that's sort of what he brings now, going back to that trade, obviously I wish the Bruins got more. But the more and more I look at it, it's like, were they realistically going to start the year with Swayman and Bussy, where you have Swayman who is clearly, going to be your guy, but you having a veteran behind him. And that's why I said throughout free agency or going into free agency, I would have loved for them to go grab a cheap veteran backup.
Yeah, like Drieger, however you say it, Chris.
Yeah, like someone like that, and that you could sort of just plug in and know what you're gonna get. Korpisalo costs a little bit more than what you would ideally pay that person to be. And again, like, I think, it's realistic to believe the Korpisalo's number is going to go up this year. He's going to have, less playing time, better systems, all that stuff. But I mean, I don't think you can go into the year with him as the starter. No. And so I think Swayman does have that leverage where it's like, hey, like, you're going to not play me? Like, right. I want my 9.5. And again, maybe, we don't know what he's asking for, but 9.5 is a lot, but I don't know. They traded Ullmark, so they've got to pay him. Him.
And I mean, it's not a great situation if that has to come into play either, because if I'm looking at, I hate you, Washington Capitals, for removing.
I was going to say before we came on, I was just going to type in to look up I said Bruins cap friendly, and I hit the page and it was like, thank you for 9. I'm like, you got it. I totally forgot about this. And then I used, I think it was like Puckpedia. Yeah, I think I used like Puckpedia. And,
I'm on Puckpedia right now. So the Bruins are projected at
slowed my Chrome down a ton, but that's
Puckpedia did?
Yeah, I think it was Puckpedia.
Gotcha. Well, we're not blaming you, Puckpedia, if you're listening, but we appreciate you. Don't sell and keep improving your website. That would be wonderful. But yeah, the Bruins are projected at $8.6 million in cap space. So if Swayman does come in at 9.5, there would have to be some shuffling. So I do anticipate that. I don't think that the Bruins would have traded Linus Ullmark unless they had an understanding that they could fit the demands from Jeremy Swayman.
I agree.
So I think it's just like you said, a matter of time. We don't need to necessarily beat that dead horse anymore. Jeremy Swayman will be the guy in net for the Boston Bruins next season. It's just a matter of time.
But he's going to be traded in like a month, and we'll be like, man, we didn't spend nearly enough time talking about that.
Oh man, it actually is funny. The very first episode I ever did a 2-pad stack, it was last off season, and we were talking about the Patrice Bergeron contract situation, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd say it's 95% that Bergeron's going to come back and captain this team to the centennial year. It's one last ride. And the day before the episode drops, after I'm doing the editing, he announces his retirement. I'm like, oh my God, like
It's awful.
way to start it.
Damn.
Just so funny. So let's say they do the 8-8. That leaves the Boston Bruins with roughly 500, 600K in cap space. So obviously this is just, they're not taking into account any kind of roster maneuvering for some of those bubble players that will be most likely assigned to Providence. Bruins work in free agencies for the most part done. They went out and they got their big fish. Do you think that there's any appetite to bring in maybe some players that are still looking for an opportunity, kind of like what they did with Danton Heinen last year, who ended up getting a contract with the Bruins?
I think there could be, and I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing in a guy on a PTO, veteran minimum type thing if you end up signing him. And I think they love internal competition. That certainly helps it. The only thing is they have a lot of internal competition already. You think about that second line right wing spot, Lysell, Frederick, Geeky. I know Merkulov has never played there, but he's another one that could, vie for top 6 minutes.
Brazeau.
Brazeau is another one. Like, you've got a lot there. And then you in your bottom 6, like Geeky, Frederick, Brazeau, Jones, Kostelik, Beecher. I mean, you got a lot down there.
Yep.
Riley Duran. Do you want to put a guy like Merkulov in the bottom 6? Matt Patra is another one. Like, you have all these guys. Are you kind of muddying? Are you watering things down a bit, bringing in, let's say, a Kyler Yamamoto? Let's just say, which again, I don't hate. Like, he's 25, I think, 26.
Yep, 25 years old.
Could be kind of a Danton Heinen like player in the sense of kind of a role he could fill. But again, like, you have a lot already. Maybe they look on D. I don't have a name in front of me, but maybe they look more on defense because on D, you obviously have, Lowry, McAvoy, Zadorov, Carlo, Lindholm, Peak, and Wotherspoon, but maybe they want to throw in another. You can never have too many D. Maybe that guy ends up going down to Providence.
Yeah.
But up front, you've got a lot. And I think one thing that can't be talked about enough is like Georgi Merkulov has had 2 really strong seasons in Providence, at least statistically. So can you send him back to Providence where in reality, like, what is there left to develop down there? Yes, you can become a better 2-way player, but also, like, at some point you do have to graduate to the NHL level. And so that's a guy who, should be vying for your NHL team. Matt Patra's another one, right? Like, ahead of schedule last year, really good. Coming off shoulder surgery, though, do they just stick him in Providence to start the year and say, hey, get back to your game at the professional level down there? I'm not saying, I think he ends up sticking with the NHL team. I think he's too good and too skilled not to, but like, I think that's a possibility. Fabian Lysell, like, you have so many of these young guys along with established guys who are looking to sort of move up. Trent Frederick's going into a contract year. Like, do they try him on that second line? And to see if he's potentially a top 6 guy. And I think for his own value, if he can say, hey, I played on the second line this year, I put up, 50 points, pay me like a second line winger, he's going to have leverage. So, and then you're also have to take into account, and I know I'm going deep into the lineup stuff here, but, this is the last year of Jim Montgomery's contract. And and as of now, he has not been offered an extension, or he's not signed an extension.
Right.
Is he going to be comfortable with, a forward grouping that has, Lysell in the top 6, Patra and Merkulov in the bottom 6? He might opt for veterans where it's Frederick in the top 6 and a third line that's more veteran heavy. So that's the thing, is where, like, bringing in a vet, maybe, you have so much there, and so many questions already. Do those questions get answered if you bring in a Yamamoto or like a Blake Wheeler? It might hurt things. Now, it might help things because a guy like that just goes off and takes a lineup spot, and obviously you take that. Look at Danton Heinen. But I do think there's some question marks there.
And then on the point you made about Merkulov too, I mean, the Bruins have always been aggressive in the NCAA free agent pool, and one of the things that earned them that spot, obviously, is the prevalence that Boston is in the hockey East and college hockey community. Everybody knows Boston. A lot of college teams come in through here and play in Boston. But some of that promise that Sweeney in the front office delivers is that of opportunity, right? And Merkulov signed here as an NCAA free agent. what's it going to say to other prospective NCAA free agents if we don't, if the Boston Bruins do not give Georgi Merkulov a shot at camp? It's got to go towards that culture and differentiating themselves as an organization to prospective free agents. If they just go out and find another James Van Riemsdyk and plug him in over giving the kids a shot, that could potentially shoot the Bruins in the foot in the future when it comes time to maybe, secure a free agent from the NCAA or not.
Yeah, it's not a bad point. I think you also look at like Brandon Bussey. Like Brandon
Mm-hmm.
Bussey was an was an NCAA free agent, and he's been phenomenal in Providence the last 2 years. And it looks like he might be getting put through waivers this fall. I mean, unless he really outperforms Jonas Corposalo in camp and in the preseason. Like again, so that's another one. I think with Merkulov, obviously there was a lot of defensive stuff
Yeah.
that they had to kind of clean up with him. But that's a guy with high, offensive upside,
Yep.
legitimate offensive upside. And, you look at some other NCAA free agents, and Mark McLaughlin, and I know Riley Duran was drafted by them, but I kind of put him in that same, NCAA
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
And those are good, reliable forwards who could be, bottom six guys. Like I've always said about Mark McLaughlin, is he going to play in your top six? No, but he's a
Yeah.
good, reliable fourth, potentially, third liner when you need him in a pinch. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen here. Although I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I want the Bill Ricka kid to
Right.
shine in Boston. That's like New England Hockey Journal special. But I do, I think those are reliable guys. But with Merkulov, you have a guy with offensive upside,
Yeah.
So I think you've got to try to find a way to utilize that. You don't you don't really have a spot on the left wing because now Zaka is probably going to move to the left wing.
Yeah. Max Jones is coming in.
Max Jones, you've got obviously Marchand,
Yep.
and down the middle again, like you've got Lindholm, you got Coyle, Patra. So again, like I don't, and I don't want Merkulov on that fourth line. I want him higher in the lineup, getting offensive zone time. And, do you look at him? Do you keep Zaka down the middle and put Merkulov on the left side in the top six if he has a great training camp? I don't know, but I think it's worth asking the question.
Yeah. So on that point there, I'm curious your thoughts. And I know you said that you would prefer to have Matty Poitras on the NHL club. Now, for that same perspective there, do you put Poitras behind Coyle and behind Lindholm as 3C? Or do you let Coyle kind of slot in where he truly excels as 3C and maybe pencil in Poitras at 2C? Obviously, it's going to be highly dependent upon how they look in camp and everything. But I mean, that's my thought is I would prefer to have Poitras in that second line center role and put him with some more elevated skill players to create.
It's not a bad. I agree. I think there's merit to that. Coyle had what 60 points last year,
It was a great season for him.
and that's the thing is like, and I keep I don't know if he's the best fit next to Marchand, but I do think he's reliable enough that you can sort of use that second line, Marchand, Coyle, and whomever they put on that right side, which Lord knows, can be a solid shutdown line.
Yeah.
I also think with Poitras on that third line, you're getting some more favorable matchups. Obviously, he's not playing with the higher end talent. But I also think, like, let's say he's between Frederick and Geeky. Like, I don't think that's bad. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think you can rely on Coyle more. Obviously, better on draws, stronger, bigger, all that stuff. So I get that. And I think, obviously in a couple of years, Poitras will be in that top six.
Yeah.
I just think to start when, and again, as you said, it hinges on training camp.
Right.
But when you look at sort of what happened with him last year, and even before he got injured, there were a lot of hard hits on him. There were a lot of like, ooh, okay. Like, again, 19-year-old kid going up against grown men. I think the third line, it gives a little bit more of that runway. Not a ton, but a little bit more maybe than that second line would, coming off shoulder surgery and not wanting to stunt his growth. And again, like if the second line was like, let's just say Marchand and Pastrnak for some reason, right? Like if he was going to be with like two elite wingers, veteran guys who know know the ways of the league, then I'd be like, yeah, I think that's probably like a good place to put him. If it's Marchand and Lysell or Marchand and Frederick. Like, I don't know if that's the thing. But again, like, you're gonna have to find, like, I think Coyle's fine with Marchand.
Yeah.
I do wonder though. I think it was Scott McLaughlin who recently mentioned it to me. I think it was him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'll say it was Scott. That said, that first line could be Marchand, Lindholm, and Pasternak, and then it would be Zacha with that second line. To kind of unlock Marchand's offense more with Lindholm and Pasternak. So, but back to your thing, I would prefer Potter on that third line to start. And again, like, if he warrants moving up, great. And again, I think Coyle was fine in that 2C spot during the year,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I can just see it now. If it is a Marchand, Lindholm, Pasternak line, how long until TNT or ESPN are saying, "Oh, the perfection 2.0"?
It'd be
I
great.
swear to
Yeah.
God, I would try to find the nearest beam that could support my weight and just end it all.
The Bergeron would they'd be like starting to do like, oh, Lindholm and Bergeron, they're the exact same
Yeah,
person.
yeah,
It works great.
yeah, exactly. All right, so I have some questions from some listeners as well.
Okay.
Tommy asks, who is a dark horse candidate to make the roster out of Providence? You already mentioned Georgi Merkulov, as well as some other names. Tommy says specifically for him, it's Trevor Kuntar. He's interested to hear your thoughts. For me, I'll start. I honestly think, based on everything I've heard from development camp and from people that are pretty well plugged in on the scouting side of things, apparently Riley Durant has really come on strong in the last couple of years. And I do know that I think he's slated to be on Providence this upcoming year, not returning back to school. He signed his entry-level contract, I believe. Is that correct, Evan?
Yeah. He's done. I think he was in
Yeah.
Providence
Okay.
with the Bruins for a little bit. In the
Okay.
spring.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's a name that I've been hearing a lot about, and I did really like what I saw out of him at development camp. So that's probably my pick. But who do you think, Evan?
That's a good one. He looked good at camp, and again, I just like, Durant's definitely a dark horse pick. I wouldn't,
Yeah.
I don't think he is going to make it, but I would definitely like watch him in camp. I go back to Merkulov, and I know I mentioned him before, and I know
Mhm.
it's not an exciting answer, but I think people are kind of overlooking just like he was good for 2 years in Providence, the last two.
Yeah.
They might be like, if he has a great training camp, they might be forced to find a roster spot for him. And
Mhm.
who does he take the place of? Like, does that force Potter down to Providence? Does that force Lysell out? Does that, is Brazeau in the lineup? Like, because again,
Yeah.
like, that changes the dynamics of everything. So I would put him as like my dark horse of
Mhm.
someone who, like, I was talking to some hockey people at dev camp, and they're like, he's gonna have to like be in the NHL this year. Like, he's graduated from Providence. So I don't know. I like that. To me, that's my dark horse guy. That's the guy that
Mhm.
I'm watching most in camp.
Another name that I think is kind of interesting with that question would be maybe even Vinny Lettieri. And the reason why I say that is obviously he came back in the trade for Lauco, but he was in the Bruin system for a little bit there, and he was producing really well in Providence. He actually earned a call up and some games at the NHL level with the Bruins, but unfortunately he got injured in a practice or a pregame skate or something, and he couldn't make his start. So I do think that he can kind of bring that same level of skill. I don't think he'd be above Merkulov or Lysell in the depth chart on that front, but down the road, I could see him making an appearance, if injuries rear their ugly head this year for the Bruins.
Yeah, potentially, and I he's definitely a call up. Another one like Mark McLaughlin.
Yep.
When does he get called up? Unless he has a great training camp and makes the team, which would be awesome. Again, terrific. But yeah, I think for him, I think that they're like, I think I don't know if there's a guy like Kujar's interesting. I still think he's a ways away, at
Mm.
least now. I think like he needs time in Providence. Because he fits more, I think, into that bottom six. I don't know if there's like, I'm trying to think of someone on defense. I don't think there's anyone on D right now. Like my dark horse, and this isn't for this year, obviously, because he's starting at Quinnipiac as a freshman. But Elliot Greenwald. I think
Mm.
Greenwald at some point, and I've been, again, he's a New Englander. He's from Vermont. So like we've been tracking him for a while. Of course, I'm going to be high on him. But I do think he's someone who down the road will be a very good serviceable NHL defenseman, as someone who, just a good shutdown guy, moves the puck well. Like, he's someone has the size, everything. So not a dark horse for this season, dark horse for future seasons, and someone that Bruins fans should be watching at Quinnipiac this winter.
Yeah, I guess for the defensive side, I'll throw a name at you as well. Somebody that I was watching with the Memorial Cup runner-up, Jackson Edward, on the blue line. And
Yeah, people are high on him.
With the departure of Jack Edwards, Jackson Edward will have to take the mantle of that kind of Jack Edwardism. But he obviously
you got to mic him up for the games. You got to mic him up.
Exactly. Not high above the ice, but we're literally on the ice here. At
on the ice.
But Jackson Edward plays a style of game that I think a lot of Bruins fans will adore. And you saw him working really closely with now Bruins. I don't know exactly. He's a player development coach, Adam McQuaid, former Cup winner in 2011, plays a very similar style of game that McQuaid played. He's going to be in your face. He's not afraid to drop the gloves. He took a couple suspensions in the OHL from some questionable hits with head contact. He plays that Boston Bruins style of game, that old school hockey mentality. And like I said, McQuaid was working with him a lot during development camp. And I forget the reporter. I don't want to cite it to the wrong person, but somebody asked McQuaid about that. And they were like, have you just kind of like taken a shining to Edward? And he's like, well, he kind of reminds me a lot of myself. So read between the lines, if you will. But I do think that he's a guy that, once again, in case of injury or in case of X, Y, or Z, could maybe get a look, because he's going to be making his debut with Providence this year, I believe, as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, he's 6'3", 195, I think. The Bruins are only going for Big D, only big defensemen, and you see that trend across the league. I think, obviously the NHL's a copycat league. You see Vegas and Tampa with these big D cores. And the Bruins are doing this at the NHL level, right? Zadorov, McAvoy, I think, is the shortest defenseman of the bunch. And ironically, he's the best hitter. Well, Zadorov technically, but McAvoy's right there with him.
Yeah.
But you have Lowry 6'5", and Carlo, I think, is 6'5", and Lindholm is 6'2" or 6'3". So all these big mobile defensemen.
Yeah.
And it is a shame that Jack Edwards will never get to call a Jackson Edwards game. I know. That is a shame. Need to bring him back for the kids' NHL debut. Let Jack back in the booth and call the game for Jackson Edward.
That would be amazing.
Electric.
Speaking of that, I'm curious. I haven't heard anything. Maybe you have. Haven't heard anything in quite a bit of time for the Bruins search for the next voice of the Boston Bruins. Obviously, NESN is doing a nationwide search. There was some speculation on some other national broadcasters that may have been invited to, apply and audition for the job. Obviously, Shane Knighty and Dave Gosher over there were allegedly approached, but they declined to take the opportunity. Have you heard anything new on the status for the Bruins search for a new voice?
All I've heard from people around the game is that they also haven't heard anything, and everyone's kind of like, what's going on? And it's sad because I love being in media. I love good media news. I love the tea in media. It's my I love seeing what's going on. So it's sad that I've heard nothing. There hasn't been any rumblings. I mean, people have their oh, it's gonna be this one, it's gonna be that one. Mike Monaco, he was doing Red Sox games, or he is doing Red Sox games right now for this stretch. Again, national guy for ESPN. I would assume he is, someone that they're thinking of. Again, I was not informed. I don't know.
Right.
But, that would
strictly
be someone...
speculation, everyone.
Yes. This is not official. Alex Faust was doing Bruins games for the last year. To me, those would be the two. They're there. They're young. Faust used to be with LA. I would guess that those guys would want sort of the stability of just, being the voice of one team. And obviously, there are a lot of local announcers Dave O'Brien for the Red Sox will do I think college basketball in the winter. So there is that element to it. But for the last, I don't know, however many years since Jack has been here, Jack just did Bruins games. That's all he wanted to do. And when you get those jobs, you stay in those jobs. You don't
Yeah.
leave those jobs. And then there's the other question of like, would a national person like Sean McDonough, who is from here and has a history here, would he want to come back, leave a national gig at ESPN to be the voice of the Bruins? Like, I think there's a lot of questions there of, what would he command in terms of money? Would they be willing to pay that?
Yeah.
So to me, the realistic option, and this is, I've had this answer the whole time, like Faust and Monaco are the two like that I see, but it wouldn't shock me if it's someone else. Like John Forsland was a name that was thrown around.
Yeah. That would have been great.
That would have been great, and maybe it still happens. Like, because remember, wasn't it who does the games with John Forsland as the color announcer? Oh, I'm blanking on it. And he like said before the final regular season game, like, "Oh, you won't be leaving us anytime soon, right?" And John was like, "Yeah, we'll see. Like, we'll see how the off season goes."
Yeah.
And I think Forsland's from out here, so
Yeah, he is. Yeah. So I did think he put out a tweet recently saying that he was going to, or the team did, that they are retaining him for this upcoming season.
Oh, they did.
For the
Okay, so then
Kraken.
never
So
mind.
would be great though. It's kind of like that Dave Gosher situation. Like he walked in like I know he walked in like Leo and the Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not fucking leaving.
I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. And you got lucky them. I mean, for real.
Yeah.
Like I think
What a
Vegas.
gem.
Yeah, like them. The fact that Vegas, Vegas did a lot of right things when they started out. That is near the top of the list.
Oh yeah.
Getting a seasoned, really good announcer, play-by-play guy with Shane Knighty, who I don't think had done color up to that point, but has turned into a really good color guy. So I would love Gauche, but Monaco, Faust, I think they're both very qualified, and they're probably people I'm forgetting. So
yeah,
I'm excited to see who it is, because
it's
gonna be there's gonna be a transition. Some Bruins fans are gonna be agitated. That's not Jack. That's the thing, and I think like I've always liked Jack. Growing up, I loved listening to Jack. Even now, like as I've gotten older, I like Jack a lot. And what I always have said is like he's the type of guy you want calling your team's games during a regular season when it's the mid-December game in Arizona at 9:30 on a Friday night. That's the guy you want. And he makes the big games feel like big games too. And now a lot of play-by-play guys are Syracuse types, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like it does the job, it gets the job done. And Monaco and Faust, by the way, are phenomenal broadcasters. Like there's no slight at them, they're terrific. But no one's Jack. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a bridge period.
Yeah, I have to agree. And it'll be very interesting to monitor what direction that goes. I imagine we'll probably hear something soon. The season's not too far away. And
I would hope.
Maybe they'll be doing some preseason games to test out some people. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here shortly. A couple additional questions. We talked about Monty a little bit before. What does Montgomery have to do in order to secure a contract extension?
That's a good question. I mean, he's done everything regular season wise. You think about, the record-setting year in 2022-23. You think about getting everything and more out of the last roster, in 23-24. I think it's the playoffs. Like, to me, it's the postseason. The postseason, they have to get past the second round. The problem is, do you have him wait for an extension until then? Do you have him wait until May of 2025 when he's got, decisions to make about his family, where his kid's going to school the next year? Do you kind of, sign him at the 11th hour? And I know sometimes teams do that. It's not always great for business, and it's not always great for the relationship if you tell Montgomery at the beginning of the year, hey, your whole season is predicated on how you do in the playoffs. That's a lot of stress. Yeah. And that's a lot of uncertainty. So I do wonder if they hand him an extension like around training camp. Because again, like if he goes in as a lame duck and it's, they're not going to come out and say, hey, they need to do well in the playoffs for him to sign an extension. It's just going to be, we'll play it by ear. We'll see, what happens. We like Monty, blah, blah, blah. But, I think in theory, like what's holding it up is the playoff. I think the playoff, the debacle in 2023. And then, I think they were admirable this past spring. Obviously, would have liked to have seen them knock out Toronto in 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Would have liked to have had them, fight for Game 7 against Florida. In-game adjustments here and there were questionable. So maybe it's that. That probably is it. But again, as I said, I don't know how you like do that.
Yeah, I think you're right too, and I say that because you hear what Don Sweeney said at the postseason conference, where he said he thinks that him and Neely both think that they left something on the table and they could have forced that 7, and who knows what would have happened if they went 7 against Florida. And then obviously 2023 is, we don't need to rehash that. I'm gonna have nightmares about that season. I flew down with my daughter for Game 3 and 4 in Florida, so
Oh, you did?
yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a
For
great time.
last year or this year?
Last year.
Oh,
So
cool.
we went down there and we were coming home with the 3-1 series lead, and we're like, oh yeah, everything's gonna be great. And,
Yeah, I mean, I remember after Game 4 being like, "This is done." Like this,
yeah,
because remember Game 4, like the Panthers kind of came unglued. Chuck was taking swings at Olmark, and it was like, "Oh, this is done. Like they're over. This
yeah,
is
they're
so
cooked.
over." And then 3 straight games and gone like that before you can even blink your
Mm-mm.
eyes.
Oh man, I feel like when they went out into the deadline that year, and we're not going to spend much more time on this, but when they went out in the deadline and went all in and brought in all of those names, I almost feel like the chemistry was so disrupted, and they honestly didn't look as dynamic or as dominant as what they did before when they brought in Orlov, Bertuzzi, and Hathaway. They were still winning games, but they didn't look like that dominant team that they had been all year. But more questions from listeners before we wrap. We got 3 more of them. First of which teams in the East are the biggest threat to push the Bruins into the wild card slot, or maybe even potentially out of the playoffs?
I mean, obviously, if your Atlantic teams, Florida, Toronto, Tampa, I think are always threats. I think in the Atlantic, you wonder, like, does Linus Olmark push the Senators into playoff territory? I think he definitely improves them. They're still a young team, but do they now fight for a wild card spot? Because that's another team that would need a seat at the table. Over in the Metro, like the Devils are going to be revamped. You have to think, are the Flyers going to be as good? I don't know. Like that's last year seemed like kind of just like lightning in a bottle for a bit. I mean, I know they didn't make the playoffs if memory serves, but they were there kind
Flyers
of in
did
the running
not.
all year.
No.
Yeah, they were in the running all year though. So
Yeah,
like
they were in that like dogfight with Washington and Detroit,
that's right.
and
Nobody would
all
take.
those guys yeah, I got it. You take it, and they just run into each other and fell over.
No,
Yeah.
nobody wanted it. You want like to the Islanders? Are they still going to be in the playoffs next year? So I think the Devils are sort of the team that goes up into that. I don't know about Washington. That's a team that to me seems like it's continuing on the downtrend. So I think the question is Ottawa. Is Ottawa going to be in that Atlantic running? Like
Yeah.
obviously like just Buffalo. I don't know like if they made enough substantial changes to really make me think they're going to be up in that grouping.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of knocking the Bruins into the wild card, to me, the X factor is Ottawa. That's the
Mhm.
X factor.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that's going to be a big one. My thing for Ottawa is, can they address the defensive woes? Because, they have a problem with keeping the puck out of their net. And how much of that is on Jonas Corposalo? The advanced stats did not shine a positive light on Corposalo's play last year. I think he was the goalie in the league that let in the most shots or the most goals on the very first shot of the game, which is not a flattering stat. And is that like a preparation thing? Is that a systems thing? Is that a, coaching thing? Who knows? I mean, obviously, we've talked about this on our pod before. Goalie Bob Asenza does a great job at bringing in players that have been okay or decent goaltenders in the past and turning them into legitimate NHL players. I mean, you saw Anton Hudobin weaponize his Bruins stint into a starter job in Dallas. Like, and then Dallas quickly realized, they're like, oh crap, actually this guy isn't a starter. Like, we need to get another goalie in here. Stat. So it wouldn't surprise me if Corpusalo can turn back into that, Columbus Blue Jackets, and even that late stint with the Kings, he looked pretty good with them. So but and then the Senators also traded away Jacob Chikrin. Like, what are they going to do for the blue line? So that's my big thing. I wonder about Detroit. Detroit is a team that I kind of circle as another one of those young up and coming teams. Patrick Kane obviously was convinced enough that they have an opportunity that he chose to extend for a 1-year contract when he could have gone to the market and picked a team of his choosing to make a chance at a run. So The Red Wings faithful, the Detroit faithful, I think are getting a little impatient with the Yzer plan. It's not quite
They
working
are.
the way that it did in Tampa. But they're kind of my team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think there's like the Atlantic has a couple: Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit. Montreal's not there yet, but Montreal will soon be there.
They're
As
doing it
these
the right
teams
way.
that are rebuilding, young, and at some point are going to be contenders. And Buffalo, it's been forever. Detroit feels like it's been forever. Ottawa, it feels like it's been forever. So at some point, one of those teams has to battle. To me, I think it would be Ottawa, just because the goaltending is set. But again, we talk about with goalies in new places, it's not always immediate. So wouldn't
Yep.
shock me if Ullmark struggles to begin. I hope he
Yep.
doesn't. I hope he kicks ass.
I
hope
do
he kicks
too.
ass this year.
I do too, man. I really want him to do well. At any time I think about the Atlantic and the fact that they haven't had like a shuffling from the top 3 or 4, I just think of that meme from Titanic. It's been 84 years. And
It has been.
it's
It has been.
ridiculous.
It's been a long time since the Ottawa Senators came within a goal of the Stanley Cup final.
I still have PTSD from Erik Karlsson single-handedly carrying the Senators over the Boston Bruins back then.
That was such a good, you love hockey. That was such a good, that was so fun to watch. Obviously, I was in high school. I wanted the Bruins to win, but watching Karlsson do a full ice saucer pass to Mike Hoffman,
the breakaway
right at the blue line.
God.
Oh,
disgusting.
So good.
Disgusting.
Prime Karlsson was undefeated.
Yeah. All right. 2 more questions. From Clint. This question is: do you think the Bruins are legitimate cup contenders this year with the addition of Lindholm and Zadorov and Swayman being anointed the number 1?
Unequivocally, yes. There's no excuse. They are 100% Stanley Cup contenders. They're up near the top part of the league. I think I forget where ESPN had them power ranked, but it was in the top 10. I have them somewhere in that top 7. They filled some big holes. I know they don't have the goalie tandem anymore, so yeah, you're gonna have a couple stinkers in net throughout the year. But your scoring should be higher. You should be more stout in your own zone, harder to play against. You got bigger in the bottom 6 too. So to me, yeah, they're cup contenders. They should be past that second round. They should be past it.
I agree. And I do think that one of the biggest areas of need for this Boston Bruins team was in the center ice position, and that's not a secret to anybody. We all knew this, but specifically for puck possession purposes and face-off purposes. Pavel Zacha is not a face-off guy. Coyle is a serviceable face-off guy.
Yeah,
but
okay.
He's no, and I'm not saying anybody will ever be a Patrice Bergeron, but if there was ever a strategic face-off that the Boston Bruins needed to win, over the boards came Patrice Bergeron, and you're going to win that draw maybe 65% of the time. And that was something that was, the constants in life: death, taxes, Bergeron being out there for an important face-off. Bruins didn't have that. And what they did is they didn't just go out and sign Elias Lindholm, who's more than serviceable. He will be the guy in the dot, but they also addressed in the bottom 6, that's an area of need. You can't trust Johnny Beecher to be the guy to go out there and win draws. He's still learning his way around the league, right? He's still trying to figure out what it takes to be a center iceman at the NHL level. So they identify Mark Kostelik as a guy from the Ottawa organization that maybe is a little undervalued from them. And if you look at his career stats at the dot, he's averaging about 60%. And he's another guy, say Lindholm is gassed or Lindholm's in the box. And you can put Kostelik out there on the 4th line or on the penalty kill to win an important draw and get it clear there. So not just with Lindholm coming in, Kostelik coming in, I think with both of these two guys taking big roles at the center ice position, they'll be able to close out more of those games and just be more comfortable defensively in times of stress, like on the PK. So I do think that they did their homework and they addressed that big gap. And because of that, they are going to be a contender because the rest of the team is the same, if not better, right? The only big minus is going to be Linus Ullmark.
And again, the Bruins have been good at identifying those diamond in the rough type players: Wotherspoon, Brazeau, and now
Peak.
I think Kostelik. Yeah, Peak is another one. And he's an interesting one. I'm excited to see what he can bring on that third pair throughout the season. But I think Kostelik fits that same mold of underutilized, overlooked player in Ottawa. I think he was, played consistent minutes on that 4th line or whatever it was, but very physical, hard to play against, So I think he's going to be someone that makes an impact this year. Bruins fans will enjoy him.
I did a little bit of a double take when I saw his first interview talking about the Boston Bruins, and I see the guy. He's like willing to throw hands with Arbor Xhekaj and the big boys out there, and I hear him, and he sounds almost like Shorzy. He's like, "Cool, you're just getting ready to get out there and play your game." I'm like, not obvious. I'm not making fun of him, but like, the voice did not match the face or what.
That's really funny. I didn't hear his opening. I didn't see his opening presser, but that's pretty funny.
You'll have to check it out. It was pretty funny. All right, last question, and we'll close it on a little bit of some levity here. Have you ever had your name spelled wrong on the media credential? Because Cam, who sent the question in, has had that done many times.
I think I have, because when they write it in Sharpie, it's just quick. It's funny because the name is how it's like Marinofsky. I feel like it's how it's spelled. The only question is like a lot of people think it's an I at the end because it's ski instead of sky. But yeah, I mean, it's like growing up, it's not really media credentials. It was more like when the substitute teacher would come into like second grade and she'd be like,
"Oh yeah,
all right, well, I can't say this one. You're gonna have to help me out with it, Evan." And I'd be like, yeah, Marinofsky. Like, yeah, all right. So that was really then. Media credentials, they're pretty good at spelling the name correctly. I'll give them that. So
fair enough. Well, I'm right there with you. I mean, my moniker online is Ace, but my first name's Aaron. So with the assistant teacher thing coming in, just like that Key and Peele skill, I get that.
Yeah, AA
all the time, man.
My God, I remember like all of 8th grade, all we did was be like D Nice. Is D Nice here? Like that was
Jake Quellen. Is there a Jake Quellen?
Present. Those are great. That was like the OG, like perfect Key and Peele segment.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Evan, I really appreciate you joining. I know this was a long time coming with things.
Of course. Sorry I couldn't make it sooner.
No worries whatsoever. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, maybe we can have you on again in the future during the season. Maybe break down some games and maybe closer to trade deadline time. I know you're a busy guy, but immense thank you to joining me here on the Two Pad Stack podcast. Guys, if you don't follow Evan, I don't know what you're doing. He has really great content. Evan, where can they follow your stuff?
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me, obviously. You can subscribe to New England Hockey Journal, where we cover all levels of hockey in New England. You can, and we had Elliot Greenwald on the cover, actually, of the last magazine, so that was fun. What else? Follow me on Twitter at Evan Marinofsky. And Bruins Beat comes out twice a week. Poke the Bear comes out twice a week. Go to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe. Listen. It's good stuff. I always say with podcasts, like, I think it's good we all go on each other's, promote each other's, because it's not like we're all at like 2 p.m. on weekdays. Like, you can listen to these whenever you want. So listen to as many as you want. Listen to Two Pad Stack. Listen to Poke the Bear. Whatever. But yeah, that's where you can find me. That's my stuff.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off then. And for those of you listening, once again, thank you. This has been episode 46 of the Two Pad Stack podcast, sponsored by Iron and Steel Threads and SeatGeek. And we'll see you next time. Peace.